I want to start with Syria. Good riddance to the murderous Assad regime. Obviously, we have a stake in what comes next in Syria, given the fact it's a very volatile part of the world. I support the very cautious engagement of the Biden administration with HTS, but we should acknowledge their very poisonous genealogy, beginning with al-Qaeda morphing into al-Nusra. The other issue, of course, in Syria is that when you've got a situation like we see today, there are opportunities for ISIS to get further back on its feet, to provide it more oxygen. And as you know, the tip of the spear in our fight against ISIS has been our Syrian Kurdish partners, the SDF. But at this moment, President Erdogan of Turkey has been backing attacks of the so-called Syrian National Army, which Turkey largely controls, against our partners, the Syrian Kurds, which opens the door to a revival of ISIS. Because of the actions of the United States government, Turkey has so far paused that effort. Senator Graham and I have introduced legislation to impose sanctions on Turkey should they renew those attacks in an aggressive way. We talked about this. I know that you recognize the importance of that partnership with the Syrian Kurds, but just a very straightforward question. Do you agree that we should continue to support our partners, the SDF, in the fight against ISIS?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Not only that, but I think we also need to recognize that there are implications to abandoning partners who have a great sacrifice and threat actually jailed the ISIS fighters. One of the reasons why we were able to dismantle ISIS is because they were willing to host them in jails, a great personal threat to them. And obviously that situation is very tenuous. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I do think it's important to respond to this opportunity in Syria, because it could be an opportunity. Look, the new people that are in charge there are not going to pass an FBI background check, okay? We recognize that. These are not people we know all about, and their history, as you said, is not one that gives us comfort. That said, it is in the national interest of the United States, if possible, to have a Syria that's no longer a playground for ISIS, that respects religious minorities, ranging from Alawis all the way to Christians, that protects the Kurds, and at the same time is not a vehicle through which Iran can spread its terrorism to Hezbollah and destabilize Lebanon, not to mention what's happened in other parts. Not only is it in the national interest of the United States, it's in the national interest of virtually every nation state in the Middle East to see that come about. That is worth exploring. There is an interesting dynamic at play, and Senator Paul asked a moment ago about the impact of sanctions. I would argue that the Caesar sanctions directly contributed to the downfall of the Assad regime in many ways. We find ourselves in this interesting situation now where, because I think it was reauthorized as part of NDAA, we now have these sanctions in place against the government that no longer exists. But nonetheless, it's an opportunity for us to explore how we could use that tool, the removal of it, and others, if in fact the territory is fertile for these outcomes. There are impediments to this that go beyond simply the new people in charge. And one of them, as you pointed out, is Erdogan and what his intentions are. Right now, there's a very tenuous ceasefire with regards to the Kurds. It's important for that to be maintained. I think it's important to signal to Erdogan early, including through this hearing, that they should not view a transition in power in the U.S. as a window in which they could take advantage of to sort of violate whatever agreements were in place. Right now, what we want in Syria is stability so that we can explore what opportunities exist to bring a different dynamic, because it would have an impact on Lebanon, on Israel, on the situation in Gaza, and on the broader Middle East. And to walk away from an opportunity that may not come back. By the way, the Russians have been run out of there, the Iranians have been run out of there, but they are pragmatic foreign policy operators. If we don't explore these opportunities, they will work their way back in there at some point.
And I agree with everything you just said, and look forward to working with you on that.